Welcome to all B.Sc. first year students in online classes. In last period we have completed external characters of Wallago Attu or the external morphology of Wallago Attu. Up to here we have studied classification of Pisces or especially classification of Wallago Attu, their introduction. Second point which is to be we have studied external morphology part first and second, external morphology part second. Now the new point, new aspects we have studied, and that aspect is the study of coelom of Wallago Attu. Study of coelom of Wallago Attu. As like that of other animals, in fish, internally there is a cavity, internally there is a space is present. This cavity or this space is called as the coelom or the body cavity. In Wallago Attu, which type of body cavity is present, which type of body cavity is to be found, we have seen, we have studied today in the article study of coelom of Wallago Attu. Study of coelom of Wallago Attu we have seen, we have studied. See the figures. This figure shows that is the fish Wallago Attu, freshwater shark, abundantly found in fresh waters of rivers, reservoirs, tributaries, ponds, lakes, where fresh water which is to be found at that place. This fish these are to be found, this fish these are to be occur, that is the freshwater shark Wallago Attu. When we have dissect, when we have cut this fish from this area, or when we have dissect the ventral side, then we have see the body cavity or the coelom of the fish we have seen, we have found. Coelom. The coelom of Wallago Attu is a spacious cavity. Coelom of Wallago Attu is a spacious cavity consisting of coelom of Wallago Attu is a spacious cavity consisting of two distinct and unequal compartments. This coelom these are to be consist two part, spacious bag-like sac-like structure, and this spacious bag-like sac-like structure these are to be divided, these are to be separated, distinct two part. One is the short, small, triangular anterior part, and second is the large, spacious, irregular part, that is posterior chamber. Anterior chamber and posterior chamber, that is consisting of two distinct and unequal compartments, as the anterior first triangular shape small chamber, it is called as pericardial cavity, and posterior large irregular chamber, posterior large irregular space, that space or that cavity is called as abdominal cavity. Means coelom or the body cavity, coelom or the body cavity of Wallago Attu, inside the fish body a space is present, a cavity is present, that space, that cavity is called as the coelom, or it is also called as body cavity. In Wallago Attu, this body cavity is spacious cavity, and this cavity these are to be consisting of two distinct unequal part, two distinct unequal compartment, anterior or the anterior part, anterior small triangular compartment chamber, it is called as pericardial chamber, and posterior large spacious irregular chamber, that chamber is called as the abdominal chamber. Means anterior pericardial chamber is small triangular, whereas posterior large spacious abdominal chamber is to be large irregular shape. Means these two unequal compartment which is to be found occur inside the body cavity of fish Wallago Attu. The pericardial and the abdominal compartment separated by a muscular transverse partition. These two chambers, pericardial chamber and abdominal chambers, or pericardial cavity and abdominal cavity, these two chambers, these two compartments separated by a partition which is to be muscular transverse partition. Which partition? The partition is muscular transverse partition, which is called as septum transversum. Remember, those cavity, those space which is to be present in the body of Wallago Attu, this space, these are to be divided into two distinct parts. Anterior small triangular chamber, it is called as pericardial chamber, and posterior large irregular chamber called as the abdominal chamber. These two chambers, these are to be separated by a septum, separated by a diaphragm, separated by a transverse partition. That transverse partition, these are the muscular transverse partition, and this muscular transverse partition is called as the septum transversum. Septum transversum divides two compartments, anterior small triangular pericardium compartment and posterior large spacious abdominal compartments, which is to be occur inside the body of the fish Wallago. The anterior small triangular sized compartment, is called as pericardial cavity. Anterior small triangular sized chamber cavity which is to be present inside the body of Wallago Attu, that compartment is called as pericardial cavity, and posterior large sized irregular shaped compartment cavity, that is called as the abdominal cavity. Pericardial cavity and the abdominal cavity. Coelom dorsally protected by the branchial bones. Dorsal side branchial bones, these are to present, or bones of branchials which is to be protected, and ventrally coelom, these are to be protected by the muscles and skin. Ventrally it is to be protected by the muscle bundles, myotomes, and posteriorly it is to be protected by the coracoid bone of pectoral girdle. Posterior side, this coelom, posterior part of the coelom which is protected by the bone of pectoral girdle. Coelom is dorsally protected by the branchial bones, and ventrally it is protected by the muscles and skin. Whereas posterior side of this coelom, which is to be protected by the bones of the pectoral girdle, and that bone is called as the coracoid bone. This coracoid bone, these are to be protected coelom. Posterior side, dorsal side it is to be protected by muscles and skin, and ventrally this coelom, these are to be protected. Ventrally it is to be protected by muscles and skin, and dorsally it is to be protected by the branchial bones. Branchial bones are dorsal, muscles and skin on ventral, and posterior it is to be protected by the coracoid bone of the pectoral girdle. Inside these bone, a space is present, a cavity is present. That cavity is called as the coelom, and this coelom, these are to be divided, differentiated two compartment, unequal chamber, anterior small chamber, pericardial chamber, and posterior irregular large size chamber called as the abdominal chamber. Pericardial cavity and the abdominal cavity inside the body of the fish. The coelom or the coelomic cavity. Coelomic cavity or the coelom of Wallago Attu has an outer peritoneal membrane. It is to be covered by cell layer. Coelom cavity is to be covered by a cell layer, that outer cell layer is called as the outer peritoneal membrane and inner pericardial membrane. Two cell layers, these are to present in the coelom. Outer cell layer is called as the peritoneal membrane layer and inner cell layer is called as the pericardial membrane. The pericardial membrane is covered by the heart. Name itself indicates that pericardial cavity. Pericardial cavity, why it is called as pericardial cavity? Because it covers, it protects the important organ of animal, and that important organ is the heart. Heart is also called as pericardium. Heart is also called as pericardium, and that's why the pericardial membrane is covered by the heart, and the pericardial cavity encloses the pericardium, which is called as the heart of Wallago Attu, which is important organ for survival for life. And abdominal cavity is enclosed by the part, abdominal cavity, these are to be enclosed all visceral organs or alimentary canal. Name itself, it is also called as visceral cavity. Abdominal cavity is also called as visceral cavity. Abdominal cavity and visceral cavity, these two important compartments, these are to be seen, these are to be found in the body of the coelom. Suppose we have drawn the fish. This is the Wallago Attu. This is the Wallago Attu we have drawn here, just a rough sketch, not exact. Where the coelom, these are to present just behind to the eyes mouth opening, these are to be occur into this coelom, these are to be in this fashion. Coelom, these are to be in this fashion. This is first green colored, it is called as pericardial cavity, unequal compartment, which is to be triangular small, that compartment is called as pericardial. And pericardial membrane, these are to be covers, these are to be encloses the organ, that organ is called as pericardium or heart. And the second chamber, next chamber, large spacious chamber, which is to be called as the, which chamber? It is to be called as the abdominal cavity, which is to be shown in blue color. Yes, this abdominal cavity, these are to be encloses all visceral organs or alimentary canal. Visceral organs or alimentary canal, these are to present inside this visceral organ. Hence it is also called as visceral cavity. Hence it is called as visceral cavity. In between these two, which are in between these two, that is in between pericardial cavity and abdominal cavity, a partition is present, which is to be shown here below, that is black color. Such a partition, it is called as the septum transversum, a muscular partition which is to present in between anterior chamber and the posterior chamber, and this septum, this diaphragm is called as septum transversum. Anterior chamber is called as pericardial chamber and posterior chamber is called as abdominal cavity or visceral cavity. Visceral cavity encloses all viscera or alimentary canal from esophagus, stomach, intestine, rectum, all these visceral organs, alimentary canal, these are to be encloses inside the cavity. That cavity is called as the abdominal cavity or the visceral cavity. In the anterior chamber of body cavity, that is pericardium, in the anterior chamber of the body cavity, pericardium, a white gelatinous liquid is present. In the anterior chamber of the pericardium, which is the anterior chamber, see this is the anterior chamber, which is to be look like red color. This anterior chamber, there is a presence of fluid. In the anterior chamber of body cavity, that is pericardium, a white gelatinous liquid is present, and this white gelatinous liquid, which is called as pericardial fluid, which is to be shown here in red color, which is to be shown in here red color. This pericardial fluid, which is to be important, which is to be most useful, because this pericardial fluid protect the heart from injury. This fluid, these are to be protect the heart from the shock absorber. The shock absorber which is to be found in your vehicles. Shock of ज्याला आपण म्हणतो. Yes, when adverse condition, when there is a duck condition, where is a dig condition occur, a major dropping condition, these are to be from such dropping or digging condition to save our vehicle, that is shock up, these are to present. Similar fashion, inside the pericardial cavity, a white gelatinous liquid is present, and this white gelatinous liquid is present in pericardium. That liquid is called as the pericardial fluid. And what is the function of this pericardial fluid? This pericardial fluid protect the heart from injuries, protect the heart from danger, protect the heart from other different abnormal shock, abnormal situation, and it is to be act as a shock absorber. With this, anterior pericardial chamber cover heart, and posterior abdominal chamber or visceral chamber protect the alimentary canal or the body, and whole this cavity, these are to present inside the body of the fish, inside the body of the Wallago Attu. It is called as the coelom of Wallago Attu or coelom of fish. Yes, here is we have completed the coelom of Wallago Attu. Again, we have observed this fish. In this fish, where is the coelom is present? In this fish, inside, just from mouth region behind to the upper column up to the this part, a coelom is present. Especially in this fish, trunk is to be short. Trunk is to be short, and this coelom, that is which is to be lastly opened by a space. Just generally this coelom, these are to be in this fashion. These are to be look like. These are to be, because lastly it is to be opened by a opening, that is genital opening, anal opening, and the urinary opening. The coelom body cavity and pericardial cavity is the part of the space or the cavity inside Wallago Attu. With this, we have completed the important and small article, short article, that is coelom of Wallago Attu. Thank you.